They call him the King of Swindlers, or King Con. Paul Bint is a man who's spent his life taking on other people's identities, even masquerading as a doctor and senior figures in the legal system. So how did he get caught out and put away?
At Gerard's Cross.
How you been, okay?
Bit busy at the moment, just working on a very high-profile case.
So you're very high up in the profession, then?
Yeah, I like to think so.
That'll be £60, please, mate.
60? Okay. It looks like someone's lifted my wallet.
Have you got your chequebook at all, or a credit card?
Everything is in my wallet.
Really?
If I give you my card, my name's Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
Come to the office in the morning and pick the money up, is that okay? You can never trust a barrister, eh?
But the man in the cab wasn't the famous barrister, Keir Starmer.
And that day would mark the start of the downfall of a man who'd spent his whole life impersonating the rich and famous, fabricating audacious lies and elaborate scams. A man who became known as the King of Swindlers, Paul Bint.
He started creating a new persona 2 months earlier.
Paul Bint, posing as a barrister, has tried to trick people into going on dates with him through internet dating agencies.
First, assuming the identity of another top lawyer, Jonathan Rees, Bint used MySpace to woo 42-year-old Viv. Flattered, she agreed to a date.
When he turned up, obviously he was impeccably dressed in a suit and like a great big bunch of flowers with him. He was very charming, very polite, so very articulate.
I hear you're a barrister.
I am. 6 years now. Trained at Oxford. Work in the city.
Viv was instantly hooked.
But behind Viv's back, Bint was turning his attention to another woman, and to impress her,
He'd promoted himself from a barrister to this man, Director of Public Prosecutions, Keir Starmer. Once again, Bint had been scanning the lonely hearts. This time his target was 41-year-old Diane, a businesswoman from Gerard's Cross in Buckinghamshire, who'd been looking for love.
He described himself as a fit barrister. He sounded very charming, very intelligent, and quite funny.
And ready for their date, posing as Keir Starmer, the head of the Crown Prosecution Service, Bint made sure he got a wig, a gown, and even gone as far as breaking into court to steal a laptop.
I decided to meet him in Windsor. We went for a walk, and he talked a lot about himself. That was the basis of the day, about his life, about his very privileged upbringing, the work he was doing on the G20 summit at the time. He seemed fairly decent type of chap.
But neither woman knew that Bint's flashy lifestyle was just a charade. The expensive cars he drove were on test drives, and promises of luxury holidays were just a ruse. He was actually penniless and just after a roof over his head.
On his second date, he invited himself over. He wanted to stay overnight on the couch. You know, he said he was working in town the next day as well, so it's reasonable that he wouldn't want to commute all the way back to Windsor.
Paul Bint was homeless at this time, and at some stage during this period he started to steal from them.
Diane realised that money was disappearing from her bank account, whilst Viv began noticing valuables from her house were going astray.
I discovered the bracelet was missing and some DVDs as well, so then I was actually then doing loads of internet searches and then up the picture from the Daily Mail. That was him. I thought, you know, what's King Con doing with someone like me?
Viv was horrified. The man she thought was a top barrister was Paul Bint, a prolific con man who'd spent most of his life in and out of prison for masquerading as others.
Paul Bint had quite an ordinary upbringing, and to his early teens he started to impersonate other people, and certainly by his early 20s he was impersonating doctors with no qualifications.
In the early 80s, Bint began working at a hospital. It would be the start of years faking it as a medic.
stealing a doctor's coat and a pager, Bint managed to pass himself off as a doctor in 10 hospitals in the northwest of England. As Dr. York, he actually tried to treat patients, stitching a man's head, arranging x-rays, even trying to change a drip in a poor woman's arm.
Finally, in 1983, it landed him in jail. But after a short stint inside, he was back at it, but this time he expanded his repertoire. 1 minute he was an aristocrat, gate-crashing Viscount Linley's party, the next a property magnate, and then a police officer.
We really don't know what his motivation is, or has been in the past. Clearly, sometimes it's to do with obtaining cash, credit cards, and financial reasons. But the motivation sometimes just be the fact that he likes the con. He likes to be able to convince other people he is someone else. It just appears to us that Paul Bint didn't like being Paul Bint.
By 2007, Bint had racked up more than 150 offences and served time for impersonating an army officer, a doctor, a lawyer, a ballet dancer, and even the Earl of Arundel.
But this time it was a petty lie in the back of a cab that got Bint caught.
That'll be £60, please.
Someone's lifted my wallet.
Really?
My name's Keir Starmer.
In March last year, that same London cabbie turned up at the offices of Keir Starmer, the Director of Public Prosecutions, demanding the £60 Bint had failed to pay him. The staff there realised that someone had stolen their boss's identity and rang the police.
We did a check on the phone number that Keir Starmer had apparently given to the cab driver. We realised that number was actually registered to a well-known fraudster, Paul Bint.
Coincidentally, police had also had a call from Viv, telling them that she'd been hoodwinked by Bint.
At the same time, there were rumblings of an incident in Windsor where Keir Starmer had supposedly threatened a car clamper.
There'd been an argument with the clamper, but it was Bint posing as Keir Starmer. In his arrogance, he talked to the local newspaper, who'd put it on the front page. It was a gift for police. A quick check on the car involved led them to Diane, one of the two women Bint had been stringing along.
Bint was at a pre-arranged meeting in Reading on the 19th of May. We sent the team down there. Unfortunately, we struck lucky and he was arrested the same day.
Mr. Paul Bint?
But Bint was unrepentant.
When he was arrested and also when he was later interviewed at the police station, I would describe him as confrontational, quite aggressive and quite arrogant as well. He admitted being Keir Starmer, said there was nothing wrong in using someone else's name, denied all the allegations that were put to him.
I felt quite sick, actually. I felt this person had been in my house, took money out of my account, he drove my car, just profusely lied and made out that he was somebody he was not.
I think he's just out for what he can get. How can anyone actually have any social conscience? It's just so wrong.
But once police had visited the two women he'd duped, the game was up.
In court, he denied all the allegations, very confident in the witness box, very confrontational still.
But after a trial lasting 2 weeks, the jury found Bint guilty of fraud by false representation, burglary and theft. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison. The king of swindlers has been stopped for now.
I think he just obviously wants an easier life at the expense of other people. That's, you know, the type of person he is.
He's coming out of prison at the end of this year, and he will reoffend again. He will do it again because that is the only way he knows how to live his life.
Paul Bint is a very convincing liar. You have to remember he spent his whole life lying. Will he change? Well, I seriously doubt he will.
The only way he knows how to live his life. Talk about a serial offender, this guy.
Yeah, when this guy's not in prison, he's conning people. He has 155 convictions so far and asked for another 350 crimes to be taken into consideration. You see, once he starts pretending to be someone, the deceptions just spiral. I'll give you one example from 2000 when he was pretending to be a lawyer involved in the Lockerbie trial. He did that to get a first-class train ticket to Scotland. Then when he's on the train, he pretends his laptop with vital information for the trial has been stolen. The train gets delayed for a couple of hours. The train company then put him up in a top hotel to try and sort it all out. When he's in the hotel, he then starts a relationship with a former Miss Edinburgh. And so it goes on. He's quite convincing and charming. The scams, though, get exposed pretty quickly because they're not very sophisticated by then. He's on to the next one.
Yeah, it's interesting you say they're not very sophisticated because there's a real Walter Mitty quality here. He is an absolute fantasist.
Yeah, classic fantasist stuff, saying he was friends with Robbie Williams, he owned a car that was in a Bond film, that he was married to a famous actress. But some of the deceptions were incredibly, incredibly serious. During that whole phase, whilst he's pretending to be a doctor, you saw it there in the film, he was actually treating people. He was writing prescriptions, ordering blood tests. In one
terrible incident. He told the parents of a teenager who'd been involved in a serious road accident that she'd be okay. Within 6 hours, she died. I mean, devastating. And then one of the things we don't know is that after doing that con for a decade, he then switches to pretending to be a lawyer. So you saw the Keir Starmer stuff, Lockerbie. Recently, he conned a woman out of thousands by pretending to be a lawyer representing Madeleine McCann's family. So, I mean, staggering.
And when it came to court then, Matthew, how did he explain all of this away? Did he attempt to explain it away?
Well, he said he'd been abused as a child, his father had died on Christmas Day, his mother had been married 7 times. Guess what? All of that was lies. He was now trying to con the jury. He had a perfectly normal upbringing. The prosecution said it was all about financial gain and boosting his self-esteem.
Very briefly, sentencing?
3 years, he'll be out probably by the end of the year. You heard police say they think he'll go straight back to this. They have a simple piece of advice. Take a long, hard look at that photograph. Remember the face. You could be the next victim.
Good advice.